My son texted me, "Dad, don't come. Madison's parents said you'll ruin the room." I was already in my dark navy suit, holding a velvet box with a cashier's check tucked inside. The kind of gift that could erase a young couple's fear overnight. I did not beg. I did not type back. I looked at the grease scars on my hands, looked at the truck keys on my dresser, and made one phone call that turned a rehearsal dinner into a public collapse nobody in that ballroom could ever forget. "Look at him," Preston Walker said the second I stepped past the private dining room doors. "He smells like diesel and cheap coffee." "Ethan, I told you not to let your father embarrass my daughter." The table went still. Silverware stopped halfway to mouths. My son stared at his plate like the white linen had swallowed his spine. Madison, his bride-to-be, leaned back with a smile so small and sharp it could have opened skin. I stood there with the velvet box in my left hand, and the whole room waiting for me to shrink. Preston lifted his glass. "This is a family event, Jack, not a roadside break room. You can wait in the lobby with the other service people." I nodded once. Then I looked straight at my son and said, "Good, now I know what table to clear first. My name is Jack Miller. I live outside Nashville, Tennessee, and I built Miller Freight and Cold Storage from one used box truck, a busted loading dock, and a temper I learned to keep on a chain. I am not fancy. I do not pretend to be. But I do know the difference between a man who owns a room and a man who only rented the lighting." That night was supposed to be simple. My son Ethan was marrying Madison Walker, the kind of woman who smiled with her teeth but never with her eyes. Her father, Preston, called himself a private equity consultant, which seemed to mean he wore polished shoes and borrowed money with confidence. Her mother, Elaine, had a voice like a steak knife sliding across a plate. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ethan had come to my office with damp palms and a rehearsed speech. He said he needed help with a down payment on a house in Belle Meade. He said Madison's parents wanted them positioned properly. He said it like poverty was contagious, and my old ranch house might infect their future children. I listened. I asked a few questions. He dodged most of them. Then I told him I would think about it. The velvet box in my hand was my answer. Inside, it was a cashier's check for $8 million. Not a loan, a gift, a clean start. I had planned to hand it to him after dessert, quietly, with no speech. I had even paid for the entire rehearsal dinner under the table because Preston's card had declined twice when the Hermitage Ridge Country Club asked for the deposit. But Ethan did not know that. Preston did not know that. Madison definitely did not know that. To them, I was just Ethan's widowed father, a man with thick wrists, plain shoes, a pickup truck with a dented tailgate, and hands that had spent decades loading freight before sunrise. They thought I was useful in private and embarrassing in public. I could have walked out after Preston's first insult. A softer man might have. A louder man might have thrown a glass. I did neither. I walked toward the table and let every face turn with me. Ethan finally raised his eyes. "Dad," he whispered, "please, not here." "Not here?" I asked. His throat moved. "Just don't make this worse." Madison's smile got wider. That would be new for him, wouldn't it? Elaine gave a delicate little laugh and touched the pearls at her neck. "Jack, nobody is attacking you. We are just trying to protect the atmosphere. There are investors here, important people. You understand, don't you?" I looked around. A retired state senator. A bank vice president. 2 men from a food distribution group I had stopped doing business with because they paid late and lied early. A local news anchor pretending not to watch. Preston stood and spread his arms, like he owned the floor under his feet. "Jack, I'll be blunt because subtlety clearly isn't landing. Ethan is entering a different world now, Madison's world. We can't have grease under the fingernails energy at the head table." Ethan flinched, but said nothing. That silence hit harder than the insult. Preston was an outsider. Madison was a stranger. Elaine was a woman who thought kindness was a household employee. But Ethan had sat in my truck as a boy, asleep against my coat while I finished late deliveries. He had eaten gas station sandwiches with me on school nights because I could not always make it home in time to cook. He knew exactly what those hands had paid for. And still he stayed quiet. I set the velvet box on the table in front of him. Madison's eyes flashed toward it. Elaine's did too. Preston noticed that before he noticed my face. "What's that?" Preston asked. "A lesson," I said. Ethan swallowed. "Dad, we can talk later." "We are talking now." Madison reached toward the box. I placed one finger on the lid. She froze. Preston chuckled, trying to take the room back. "See? This is exactly the problem. Dramatic, emotional, working-class pride. Jack, you have to understand. This wedding is about optics. We have people here who matter." I looked at the senator, then the banker, then back at Preston. "Then let's give them something worth seeing. Before I explain what happened next, you need to know what was happening before I walked into that room. Because I did not arrive blind. I arrived late on purpose. Earlier that evening, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, dressed and ready, when Ethan's message came through. "Dad, don't come. Madison's parents said you'll ruin the room. They invited investors, and don't want a trucking guy at the head table. I'll send pictures. Love you. Love you." That part almost made me laugh. I read it twice, then a second message appeared. "Please don't make me choose tonight." I stared at that line, longer than the first one. Don't make me choose, as if he had not already chosen. As if choosing only counted when the victim was present to hear the verdict. I put the phone down. My hands did not shake. I did not pace. I did not curse my dead wife for leaving me alone to raise a boy who could write that sentence. I just opened my dresser, took out the keys to the old pickup, then put them back. If appearances mattered so much, I decided to arrive in the black Lincoln I used only for funerals and bank meetings. On the drive to Hermitage Ridge, my mind went quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet. The kind of quiet that settles over a loading yard when a storm is about to hit and every driver knows to tie down what matters. At the main gate, a young security guard stepped out. He looked at my car, then at his tablet. "Name?" "Jack Miller." He tapped the screen. His face tightened. "I'm sorry, sir." "Try again." I did. A black SUV rolled up behind me and tapped the horn. The guard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, I was told specifically not to let you in." Mr. Walker said if a Jack Miller showed up, he was not part of the event. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. An operation. I looked past him at the glowing clubhouse up the hill. I knew every window, every loading entrance, every camera blind spot. Hermitage Ridge used to be an empty stretch of scrubland beside a creek that flooded twice a year. I bought it cheap, sold part of it to the club group, kept a quiet stake in the management company, and leased them most of the refrigerated storage equipment that kept their kitchen running. Preston Walker did not know that. He thought the country club was old money. It was mostly my paperwork. "What's your name?" I asked the guard. "Caleb, sir." "Caleb, who pays the company that pays you?" He blinked. "I'm not sure." "I am." I called the club's general manager, Maria Delgado. She had started as an event coordinator when the club opened. I promoted her because she fixed problems without making speeches. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Miller? I'm at the gate." A pause. "Why are you at the gate?" "Because Preston Walker removed me from the list." The pause got colder. "I'll come down personally." "No. Open the service entrance. Put me in the security office. I want camera access and ballroom audio." "Are we handling this quietly?" she asked. "For now." The gate opened 30 seconds later. Caleb stepped back so fast he nearly tripped. I drove around the side road, past the valet stand, past the trimmed hedges and the soft lights and the expensive little fantasy Preston was pretending to own. Maria met me at the service door. She wore a black suit, her hair pinned tight, her expression calm enough to scare anyone who knew her. "Mr. Miller," she said, "the head table has been asking whether the check arrived." I looked at her. She handed me a folder. "You should see this before you go in." The security office smelled like electronics and black coffee. Maria pulled up the ballroom feed on the large monitor. The camera showed Ethan beside Madison at the center table. Preston stood nearby, holding court, red-faced and glowing with borrowed importance. Elaine sat with her chin high, judging women's dresses like she had bought her own. Maria placed the folder in front of me. Membership arrears. Vendor chargebacks. Return deposits. Lawsuit notices. A stack of ugly facts wearing clean paper. Preston Walker was not rich. He was not even stable. He owed the club more than most people owed on a house. His investment firm had been dissolved. He had a lien on his home, a lien on his boat, and 3 open claims from people who said he had sold them shares in businesses that did not exist. Then Maria switched on the audio. Madison leaned toward Elaine, whispering, but the table microphone caught her perfectly. "He stayed away?" Elaine asked. "Ethan said he did," Madison said. "Thank God." "Can you imagine him walking in with those hands?" Preston would lose the senator. Elaine sipped her wine. "The old man is useful, but only in controlled settings." Madison laughed. "Useful is exactly the word. Ethan says he's bringing a check. $8 million. Once that clears, we breathe." Elaine's eyes widened. "Your father needs it." "I know." "And Ethan signed the prenup?" Madison rolled her eyes. "He signed whatever Dad gave him. He thinks marriage means trust." Elaine smiled like a door closing. "Good girl." My jaw tightened. Then Madison added, "After the wedding, I'll push Ethan to get control of the old man's voting shares. He already thinks Jack is slipping. We just keep saying it, confused, forgetful, emotionally unstable. If we can get a doctor to write something soft, Ethan can move him out of the way." Elaine whispered. "A care facility? A nice one in pictures," Madison said. "Locked doors in real life." I sat back slowly. It is one thing to be insulted. It is another thing to hear people discuss your erasure like seating logistics. Maria did not speak. She knew better. I watched Ethan on screen. He was laughing at something Preston said. For a moment, I told myself he did not know. That he was weak, not rotten. That he had been trapped by prettier predators. Then Preston leaned down and clapped him on the shoulder. "Once your father signs over those extra warehouse units, we can stabilize everything," Preston said. Ethan grinned. Not nervously, proudly. "He already signed," my son said. Last week, I slid the transfer authorization between insurance renewals. He didn't even read it. He just signed like always. My breath stopped. The room became very small. "He signed over the Franklin cold storage property?" Preston asked. "Control transfer, pending filing," Ethan said. "By Monday morning, it's mine to leverage." Madison touched his arm. "Baby, that is why I love you." Ethan smiled, not a trapped smile, a satisfied one. In that moment, every excuse I had built for him collapsed. He had not been bullied into silence. He had participated. He had forged paperwork to steal a warehouse complex from me. Not from a corporation on a screen, from me. From the company that paid wages to drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, office clerks, janitors, warehouse crews, families. He had risked them all to impress a bankrupt man in a rented tux. I took out my phone and called my attorney, David Harris. David had been with me long enough to hear the weather in my breathing. "Jack," he said. "Who died?" "Not who," I said. "What?" He went silent. "I need you at your computer now." A chair scraped on his end. "Tell me." "Pull the Franklin cold storage transfer queue. Then pull Ethan's executive withdrawals from the last 6 months. Cross-check anything tied to Walker Capital, Walker Holdings, or Madison's father. That is a serious request. It is a serious night." Typing. Silence. More typing. On screen, Preston raised a glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "tonight is about family, legacy, and the kind of bold partnerships that separate winners from workers." A few people laughed. "Workers." David came back on the line. "Jack, I found an unauthorized bridge transfer from your logistics reserve. It moved through a vendor account tied to Preston Walker. The amount is $7 million. Freeze everything Ethan can touch. Jack, now. If I do that, his company cards die, his access dies, pending transfers lock, and the bank fraud alert triggers. Good. He is your son. I watched Ethan toast Preston with my wine. No, I said. He is an employee who stole from the company and tried to steal from his father. Call the police. White-collar unit. Tell them the evidence is waiting at Hermitage Ridge. David exhaled. Understood. I hung up. Maria looked at me. Waiting. Can you control the ballroom screens? I asked. Yes. Audio? Yes. Doors? All service exits. Yes. Good. Print Preston's club debt, Ethan's transfer log, and the returned payment records. Then cut the music when I step into the room. Maria nodded. Anything else? I opened the velvet box and took out the cashier's check. $8 million. My signature, my mercy, my final stupid hope. I tore it in half, then in quarters, then smaller, until the pieces looked like dead confetti on the desk. Maria's face did not move, but her eyes changed. I took one of the blank dinner menus from a stack near the printer and wrote on the back, reimbursement of stolen company funds. Club, balance due, employment terminated for cause. I signed it, Jack Miller, chairman and majority owner. Then I placed that menu inside the velvet box. Now, I said, I'm ready for dessert. So when I stood in that ballroom with Preston barking that I smelled like diesel, I already knew more than he feared and less than he deserved. Madison pointed at the box again. Ethan, open it. Ethan looked at me. Dad, open it, I said. His fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. His face drained when he saw the handwritten menu instead of the check. Madison grabbed it from him. Her eyes moved across the lines. What is this? She snapped. A bill, I said. Preston laughed too loudly. A bill? From you, Jack? Sit down before you make yourself look even smaller. The room lights flickered once. The jazz stopped mid-note. Every screen around the ballroom went black. Preston turned toward the stage. What the hell is going on? Maria walked in from the side entrance with a microphone. She did not look at Preston. She looked at me. Mr. Miller, she said, handing it over. That was the first moment the room shifted. Important people know invisible power when it appears. The senator's wife stopped pretending to check her phone. The banker sat straighter. One of the food distribution men whispered something to his companion, and both of them looked at me differently. I took the microphone. Good evening, I said. I apologize for interrupting a dinner I paid for. A murmur ran through the room. Preston's smile twitched. That is a lie. No, Preston. Your card declined. Twice. The murmur sharpened. Elaine stood. How dare you discuss private matters in public? I looked at her. You discussed locking me in a care facility over salad. Her mouth opened and shut. Madison went white. Ethan whispered, Dad, stop. I looked down at him. You should have said that before you forged my name. The ballroom changed temperature. I could feel it. The audience leaned forward, not because they liked me, but because humans cannot look away from a mask cracking. Preston slammed his palm on the table. Enough. Security. 4 security officers entered through the rear doors. Preston pointed at me like a king ordering a hanging. Remove him. The officers walked forward. Their shoes hit the wood in a steady rhythm. Madison smiled again, but this time the smile had fear under it. Ethan stared at the floor. The officers reached me. Then they turned around and faced the room. Standing behind me, with their hands folded in front of them, Preston's face went slack. I raised the microphone. Preston, you seem confused about the chain of command. You cannot throw me out of a club where your unpaid membership is older than some of the staff. Maria stepped beside me. For clarity, she said into a second microphone. Mr. Jack Miller is the majority owner of Hermitage Ridge Country Club's operating company and the controlling owner of the cold storage systems used by this facility. The senator slowly set his glass down. The banker whispered, Miller Freight? I nodded toward him. The same. Madison turned on Ethan so fast, her chair nearly tipped. You said he was just a trucker. Ethan's lips moved. No sound came out. I looked at the room. I was a trucker. Still am on the right morning. The difference is, I never confused clean fingernails with clean money. Maria touched a tablet. The screen behind the head table lit up, not with engagement photos, with Preston Walker's overdue club balance. Elaine gasped. Preston lunged toward the screen like he could block it with his body. "This is illegal," he shouted. "This is private information." "So was my invitation," I said. "You handled that publicly enough." The first document showed unpaid dues, return checks, service charges, wine orders, event deposits, late fees. The numbers were not dressed up. They sat there naked and ugly. I read only what mattered. Preston Walker has not paid full membership dues in 3 years. He attempted to reserve this ballroom with a card that did not clear. The dinner you are enjoying was paid by me, at my son's request, because he said his future father-in-law was having a temporary cash flow issue. The banker pushed back from the table. Preston jabbed a finger at him. "Sit down, Paul. This is a family ambush." Paul did not sit. The next slide appeared. A lien notice against the Walker home. Elaine's hand flew to her mouth. Madison whispered, "Daddy?" Preston's voice cracked. "Turn it off." I did not look at him. The Walkers are not old money. They are past due money. There is a difference. A few guests stood. Some moved toward the exits. Others stayed because judgment is the cheapest entertainment in America. The next slide appeared. Walker Capital complaint filings, fraud allegations, settlement notices. The senator rose so quickly his chair tipped backward. "Preston, you told me your fund was clean." "It is," Preston barked. "This man is twisting documents. He's a bitter old mechanic throwing a tantrum because he wasn't invited to sit with decent people." I smiled for the first time. Decent people do not use their daughter as bait. Madison's eyes narrowed. "Careful." "No," I said. "You be careful." Her face hardened. There she was. Not the bride, not the victim, the closer. "You think this makes you powerful?" she hissed. "You're still a lonely old man with a dead wife and a son who couldn't wait to escape your dirty little world." A few people gasped. Ethan whispered her name, but she did not stop. "You were supposed to write the check and stay home. That was your role. That is all you were good for." I stepped closer. "And you were supposed to be smarter than your father. That was your mistake." Her mouth tightened. Preston saw he was losing the room, so he did what cowards do when facts corner them. He clutched his chest. "Oh God," he moaned. "My heart. Elaine, my heart." He collapsed sideways onto the carpet, slow enough to protect his face, loud enough to collect attention. Elaine screamed. Madison dropped beside him. Ethan half stood, confused. "Call an ambulance," Elaine shrieked. "He's having a heart attack. Jack Miller did this." The room froze between pity and suspicion. I walked down from the small stage and stopped beside Preston. He had one eye squeezed shut, the other barely open, checking whether the audience believed him. I lowered the microphone. "Preston," he groaned louder. "Your health insurance lapsed last month." The groaning stopped for half a second. I continued. "If we call an ambulance, they will take you to the nearest hospital, stabilize you, and bill you directly. If you are faking, which you are, they will discharge you into the police officers currently entering the parking lot." Preston opened both eyes. I leaned down. "Stand up before your knees become the most honest part of you." He sat up, breathing hard with hate, not pain. A ripple of disgust moved through the room. Even Elaine stepped back from him. Then the first siren came close enough to hear through the glass. Ethan looked at me. For the first time all night, he seemed to understand that this was not embarrassment. This was consequence. "Dad," he said. "Please." I turned toward him. "Please what?" His eyes shone. "Don't do this in front of everyone." I laughed once, quietly. "You stole in private and celebrated in public. I'm just matching the lighting." Madison stood, wiping imaginary tears from under her eyes, already building her next performance. "I didn't know," she said to the room. "I swear I didn't know anything. Ethan handled the money. Ethan told us everything was legal." Ethan stared at her. "Maddie." She turned on him. "Don't you Maddie me. You told me you controlled the company." "I was going to. You told me your father was signing things over." "He was." "No," I said. "He was stealing them." The ballroom doors opened again. David Harris walked in with 2 Nashville police officers and a pair of detectives in plain suits. David's tie was crooked, which meant he had moved fast. He carried a folder in one hand and the expression of a man who hated being right. He came to me first. "The bank froze the Franklin transfer," he said quietly. "The reserve theft is documented. We have enough. Thank you." The lead detective stepped forward. "Ethan Miller?" Ethan stood slowly, as if his bones had turned to wet paper. Preston backed away. "Now wait. This is a civil dispute." The detective glanced at him. "Preston Walker?" Preston's mouth shut. The detective nodded to the uniformed officers. That was when Madison truly panicked. Not when her father was exposed. Not when Ethan was accused. When she saw the officers move toward Preston, she realized the sinking ship did not have lifeboats with her name on them. "Daddy didn't do anything," she said. Preston grabbed her arm. "Call Bradley. Call my attorney." I said, "Use your own phone, Preston." Ethan's company plan was canceled during soup. Ethan looked at his dead phone like it had betrayed him. One officer turned him around. The metal cuffs clicked around my son's wrists. The sound was small, final, ugly. Ethan flinched as if struck. "Dad," he whispered. "I'm your son." I stood close enough that only he and the front tables heard me clearly. "You were my son when I trusted you. You became something else when you used that trust as a key." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I was scared." "No, you were greedy and scared came later." Madison stepped away from him, face twisted with disgust. "You idiot," she said. "You said he would never check." Ethan stared at her. "You told me to push him. I told you to be useful." That line landed harder than any slide on the screen. Ethan looked at her like he was seeing the person behind the perfume for the first time. She ripped the engagement ring from her finger. "This was supposed to be a way up," she said. "Not a prison visit." She threw the ring at him. It hit his chest and dropped onto the carpet. "You're broke," she said. "And worse, you're embarrassing." Then she turned to me, eyes bright with hatred. "You ruined everything." I picked up the ring from the carpet and put it in my pocket. "No, Madison. I canceled a transaction." Elaine sobbed into a napkin. Preston shouted about lawsuits, while officers guided him toward the side exit. Madison followed, not helping him, just making sure she stayed outside the handcuffs. The important guests left in clusters, each pretending they had seen less than they had. The ballroom emptied like a punctured lung. Only Ethan remained in front of me, cuffed, shaking, stripped of every costume he had worn. "Dad," he said. "What happens now?" I looked at the velvet box on the table. I thought about the check I had torn up. I thought about the boy who used to call me from school because he forgot his lunch and knew I would drive across town to bring it. I thought about the man who had called me senile on a microphone he did not know was listening. "Now," I said, "you learn the price of pretending money is love." The officers let him out. He did not fight. That almost hurt worse. When the doors closed behind him, the room became still. Plates of filet sat untouched. Champagne went flat. White roses sagged in crystal vases. A banner over the dessert table said Ethan and Madison forever. Forever had lasted less than dinner. Maria came to stand beside me. "What should we do with the food?" she asked softly. "Send it to the shelter downtown. The flowers? Hospitals, nursing homes, anywhere they can cheer up people who didn't earn this mess. The bill? Send it to my office." She looked at me. "I always pay my bills," I said. Then I walked out through the front doors of Hermitage Ridge for the first time that night. No guard stopped me. No valet asked for a ticket. The air outside felt cool and clean and brutal. My Lincoln sat under the lights, polished and silent. Beside it, across the lot, Preston's rented SUV was being searched by an officer. I did not watch long. I drove home alone. The house was dark when I arrived. I left the lights off. I sat at the kitchen table where Ethan used to do homework while I packed invoices into file boxes. The refrigerator hummed. The wall clock clicked. My phone buzzed with calls from numbers I did not want to answer. Reporters, lawyers, club board members. Maybe Ethan. I turned it face down. For the first time since my wife died, I understood that silence could have weight. A week later, I visited Ethan at the county detention center. I did not go because he asked. He had asked plenty. Messages through David, requests through officers. One note written on yellow paper that said only, "Dad, please come." I waited until I could trust myself not to rescue him just because his voice cracked. The visiting room smelled like bleach, old sweat, and broken pride. Ethan came in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose around his shoulders. Without his watch, his haircut, his tailored confidence, he looked younger and worse. His eyes were red. His face had gone hollow. He sat behind the glass and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Are you happy?" "No." "You looked happy." "You saw control. Don't confuse it with joy." His mouth trembled. "You destroyed me." I leaned closer to the glass. "I stopped you. You could have handled it privately. You made privacy impossible when you risked the company. It was going to work." "No. It was going to spread." He looked away. I said, "Preston was using you. Madison was using you. But you opened the door. You handed them the keys. You stole from drivers who wake up before dawn. You stole from warehouse crews who work in cold rooms until their fingers ache. You stole from mechanics who keep trucks moving in rain and heat. Do not sit there and make this a father-son misunderstanding." His eyes filled. "I wanted to be respected." "Then you should have done something respectable." That hurt him. I saw it land. "I'm facing years," he said. "You were." He looked up. "I spoke with the prosecutor," I said. "David negotiated a plea. If you cooperate, testify against Preston, admit the forged transfer, and sign restitution agreements, the worst charges will be reduced. You will serve time, but not the time you are staring at." Hope flashed in his face so fast it made me angry. "Thank you," he breathed. "I'm not finished." The hope froze. "You are fired from Miller Freight and Cold Storage. Permanently. Your executive accounts are closed. Your apartment will be sold. Your car will be sold. Your watches, furniture, and investments will be liquidated for restitution. You are removed from my will. Your trust is dissolved. When you leave here, you leave with your name and nothing else." He stared at me like I had opened the cell floor beneath him. "Dad, that is the deal. I'll have nothing. You'll have what I had when I started. You had grit, then grow some." He pressed his cuffed hands against his forehead. "How am I supposed to live? Nobody will hire me. Someone will, not for the job you want, for the job you deserve. Loading docks, warehouses, night inventory, road crews, fast food, anything honest." He looked offended, even in jail. "You want me doing labor? I want you earning lunch. I have a business degree. You also have handcuffs. Guess which one people will notice first." He closed his eyes. The old father in me wanted to soften. The old fool in me wanted to say, "Come home when this is over. We'll figure it out." I tasted those words and swallowed them like broken glass. "You do this right," I said. "And maybe one day you and I can speak as men. Not as sponsor and dependent, not as boss and thief. Men." He opened his eyes. "Will you be there when I get out?" I stood. "That depends on who walks out." "Dad." I paused with my hand on the door. He whispered, "Did you ever love me?" That question almost did what his begging could not. I turned back. "I loved you so much I made you weak. Now I love you enough to stop." Then I left. Outside, the sunlight hit hard. I sat in my Lincoln for a long time, hands on the wheel, breathing through a pain I could not name. I had saved my company. I had exposed predators. I had protected hundreds of employees. And I had walked away from my only child behind glass. Cruel revenge tastes sweeter in stories than it does in real life. In real life, it tastes like cold coffee and a house with too many empty rooms. The months after Ethan's plea were not dramatic. They were worse. Drama ends. Consequences keep showing up for breakfast. I sold his apartment. The realtor said it showed beautifully. Of course it did. Everything inside had been chosen to impress people who never planned to stay. Leather sofa, marble table, framed abstract art with no meaning, closets full of clothes, bought with money he had not earned. At the auction, his watches drew the most interest. One buyer held up a gold one and said, Executive piece. I almost laughed. It was not an executive piece. It was evidence with a clasp. Every dollar went back into the company reserve. Not because I needed it, because restitution matters. Because stealing becomes easier when someone else quietly fills the hole. Preston took a plea after Madison tried to distance herself from him in a sworn statement. That family folded like wet cardboard once the cameras left. Elaine called my office twice, then showed up once. She arrived without pearls, without driver, without the frozen smile. She asked for mercy. No, that is too generous. She demanded mercy. You ruined my family, she said, standing in my office while forklifts beeped outside the window. I looked at her for a long moment. Your family tried to put me in a locked facility and steal my company. That was talk. So is this meeting. She slammed her purse on my desk. Madison is traumatized. Madison threw a ring at a handcuffed man because he turned out poor. Elaine's face twisted. You enjoyed that. No, I said, but I noticed it. She threatened lawsuits, interviews, church gossip, society whispers. I let her empty the drawer. When she finished, I slid a folder across the desk. Inside were emails, texts, payment requests, messages where Madison asked Ethan how soon he could make Jack legally irrelevant. Messages where Elaine called me the old wallet with a pulse. Messages where Preston pushed for forged collateral. Elaine read 3 lines and stopped breathing right. If you say my name again, I told her, I file this. If Madison says my name again, I file this. If Preston thinks my name in a tone I dislike, I file this. She left without her purse. My secretary had to chase her down in the hall. That was the last time I saw any Walker in person. Winter came hard that year. I worked more than a man my age should. I visited warehouses at sunrise. I rode with drivers on short routes. I stood in freezer docks checking temperatures, while young supervisors begged me to wait in the office. I needed the cold. It kept my mind from wandering. Christmas was the worst. My wife used to overdecorate. Ethan used to complain and then secretly fix the lights on the porch because he knew she loved them. That year, I did not put up a tree. I ate soup from a can and fell asleep in my chair with the television talking to nobody. 2 days after Christmas, a letter arrived from Ethan. I left it on the counter for 3 days. When I finally opened it, I expected anger. I expected blame. I expected another attempt to find a soft spot and pry. Instead, it was short. Dad, I work in laundry now. It is hot and loud, and my hands crack from the soap. I used to think people who did this kind of work were stuck. Now I think maybe they were stronger than me. I am not asking you for anything. I just wanted to say I know I stole from more people than you. I am sorry. I do not know how to fix myself yet, but I know I have to start with the truth. Ethan, I read it once. Then again. Then again. It was not enough. Nothing could be enough that quickly, but it was the first honest thing he had given me in years. I folded it and put it in my desk. Spring came. Then summer. Ethan was released early for good behavior. David told me the date. I did not go to the jail. That might sound heartless. Maybe it was. But if I stood outside those gates with a car and a clean shirt and a warm meal, I would become the cushion again. Ethan did not need another cushion. He needed ground. So I stayed home. For 3 days, I heard nothing. For 7 days, nothing. On the 9th day, I paid a private investigator to confirm he was alive, not to interfere. The report came back clean. Ethan was staying in a sober living house that also took former inmates. He had applied for night warehouse work under the name Ethan Miller, not Ethan Miller of Miller Freight. He had listed his conviction. He had not used me as a reference. The first place rejected him. The second did too. The third hired him to unload pallets on a trial basis. I sat in my office and stared at that line until the letters blurred. A month later, I saw him. Not in a courtroom, not in a visiting room, not at my door. At a loading yard south of the city. I had gone there to inspect a refrigeration issue for a client. It was late afternoon, hot enough that the asphalt looked soft. Trucks backed into docks. Men shouted. Forklifts whined. The air smelled like diesel, cardboard, and sweat. I was standing by my pickup, yes, the old one, because I had gone back to driving it, when a crew came out for break. Ethan walked with them. He wore steel-toed boots, a faded safety vest, and a t-shirt dark with sweat. His hair was shorter. His face was leaner. His hands, when he took off his gloves, were red and split at the knuckles. He did not see me at first. He sat on an overturned crate and unwrapped a sandwich from gas station foil. No catered steak, no champagne, just bread, meat, mustard, and hunger. Then he looked up. Our eyes met across the yard. The distance between us was maybe 40 yards, but it felt longer than every highway I had ever driven. I waited for anger, shame, a plea, anything. Ethan looked at my boots, my truck, the clipboard in my hand. Then he looked down at his own hands. Slowly, he nodded. Not a son begging a father. Not a thief facing a victim. A worker greeting a worker. One nod, small, rough, earned. I nodded back. That was all. He returned to his sandwich. I returned to my clipboard. But something in my chest loosened for the first time in nearly a year. He was not fixed. People are not warehouses. You do not repair a life with a weekend crew and fresh paint. He still had restitution. He still had shame. He still had a record that would follow him into every job interview and apartment application. He still had to wake up every day and decide not to become Preston in cheaper shoes. But he was working. He was not calling me. He was not hiding behind my name. He was earning lunch. That mattered. I sold my remaining stake in Hermitage Ridge not long after. People called me crazy. They said it was a trophy asset. They said rich men do not sell landmarks after one ugly night. They were wrong. Smart men do not keep shrines to rot. I used the money to create the Miller Hands Foundation. Not a gala charity with champagne and speeches. A real one. Emergency funds for warehouse workers injured off the clock. Trade school scholarships. Legal aid for drivers cheated by shady contractors. Rent assistance for mechanics after medical bills. Food cards for families when a paycheck got trapped in some payroll error nobody at the top wanted to fix. I put the money where the work was. The first scholarship went to a young woman learning diesel mechanics because her father told her engines were not for girls. The second went to a single dad studying commercial refrigeration at night. The third went to a former inmate who wanted a forklift certification and a clean shot. I did not ask his name until after the grant was approved. It was not Ethan. I was relieved. A full year passed from the rehearsal dinner. The date came back like a bad smell. I woke before dawn and drove to a new cold storage site outside Murfreesboro. No suit. No Lincoln. Just jeans, work boots, a thermos, and the old pickup with the dented tailgate. The crew was already moving when I arrived. Pallets stacked. Dock plates clanged. A supervisor half my age tried to take my clipboard. I told him, "Touch it, and I'll put you on inventory." He laughed and backed off. At lunch, I sat on the tailgate with coffee and a turkey sandwich. Across the lot, a temp crew unloaded insulation panels. Ethan was there. I had known he might be. I had not arranged it. I had not stopped it. He moved slower than the younger men, but steadier than most. He lifted with his legs, wiped sweat with his sleeve. Helped another guy adjust a crooked load without being asked. No performance. No executive voice. No watch flashing under fluorescent lights. Just work. When the whistle blew, he sat on a stack of pallets. He opened a paper bag and pulled out a bruised apple and a sandwich wrapped in plastic. He saw me watching. For a second, the old world hovered between us. The country club, the handcuffs, Madison's ring hitting the carpet, the glass wall at the jail, all of it. Then he stood. My chest tightened. He walked across the lot slowly, not like a man approaching a rescue, but like a man approaching a debt. He stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Miller," he said. Not Dad. That hurt. It also told me he understood the distance. "Ethan." He looked at the ground, then at me. "I paid another piece of restitution yesterday." I know. Of course I knew. Every payment crossed my desk. He nodded. I didn't come for anything. I know. I just wanted to say, he paused. His throat worked. You were right. Those words were not dramatic. Nobody gasped. No music swelled. A forklift beeped behind him. Someone laughed near the dock. But those words hit me harder than Preston's exposure. Harder than the police sirens. Harder than the first letter. I waited. Ethan continued. Not about everything. Maybe you were cruel. Maybe I deserved cruel. I don't know yet. But I know this. If you had saved me that night, I would have hated you for not giving me more the next time. My coffee cooled in my hand. He looked at his cracked fingers. I thought money made men. It didn't. It made me soft enough for people like Madison to shape. And now? I asked. Now my back hurts, he said. I almost smiled. He added, but I sleep. There it was. The first clean beam in the new frame. I reached into my lunch bag and took out the second sandwich I had packed without admitting to myself why. I held it out. He looked at it. Then at me. I'm not asking, he said. I'm offering lunch, not a company. He hesitated. Take the sandwich, Ethan. He took it. For a moment, our hands touched. His were rough now. Not pretend rough. Not Jim Callis rough. Work rough. Soap split. Palate scraped. Honest. He sat on the tailgate, not too close. We ate in silence. After a while, he said, Can I call you sometime? I swallowed. Yes. Not for money. I know. Not for a job. I know. He nodded. The whistle blew. Break ended. Ethan stood and folded the plastic from the sandwich into a small square. Thank you, he said. For lunch? He looked at me. For letting me fall. Then he walked back to the crew. I stayed on the tailgate until my coffee went cold. People ask me now whether I regret what I did. They ask if I regret exposing Preston in front of everyone, letting Madison show her teeth, calling the police on my own son, stripping him of the life I had handed him. They want a clean answer, yes or no, hero or villain, justice or cruelty. Life does not pour that neatly. I regret raising Ethan to believe comfort was love. I regret signing papers because I trusted blood more than process. I regret every time I mistook silence for respect. I regret that my wife was not alive to slap sense into both of us before the damage got that far. But do I regret stopping him? No. Do I regret tearing up that check? No. Do I regret letting a ballroom full of liars watch their own reflection crack? Not for a second. Because some people only understand boundaries when they hit them face first. Ethan was becoming a man who could sell out his father, gut a company, and call it ambition. Preston and Madison were parasites with table manners. Elaine was cruelty in pearls. If I had responded softly, they would have called it weakness and eaten deeper. So I became the storm. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me old-fashioned. Maybe it makes me the villain in Ethan's worst memory. But today my son works. Today he pays what he owes. Today he looks men in the eye without hiding behind my name. Today he knows the weight of $1 because he has carried freight for it. That is not a fairy tale ending. It is better. It is real. I am Jack Miller. I am still a truck man at heart. I have lost more than I expected, kept less than people think, and learned that the hardest thing a father can do is stop catching a son who has started jumping on purpose. So tell me honestly, was I too brutal when I exposed Ethan? Took his inheritance? And let the police walk him out in cuffs? Should I have protected my son from prison and handled everything quietly? Or was that hard fall the only thing that could finally make him a man?